Hello and welcome back to my channel. I have not done a sit down video like this in so long, but this is a video that I've been wanting to make for a little while now. It's actually quite a highly requested video. And so in today's video, I'm going to be sharing my top exposure therapy tips that helped me get from the place I was in to the place I am now. If you are new here, you might not know, but I have been kind of on an exposure therapy journey over the past few years. Kind of started in 2022, and I'd say I kind of did my biggest goal in early 2024, and it really was a journey. And I think exposure therapy is a bit daunting and a bit confusing to a lot of people, so today I kind of wanted to sit here, talk you through my journey and my top tips, and explain a little bit how I managed to kind of do it, really. I also asked for some questions on Instagram, so I'm going to answer those at the end of the video. Okay, so first of all, what is exposure therapy? I think there's probably different definitions for exposure therapy. The kind of exposure therapy that I did was quite literally exposing myself to my fears. Those fears for me stemmed from trauma and from my PTSD, and exposure therapy was actually a big part of dealing with my trauma and my PTSD and getting my life back after that. Kind of put me in such a small space, and I really closed my life off for a long time. I didn't go out, I couldn't go out alone ever. I was scared of like everything. I used to sleep with my back dead against the wall, and I couldn't like sleep anywhere else that wasn't my bed. My life was very limited because of PTSD, and doing exposure therapy is the biggest thing really that I credit to being in the place I am today. So exposure therapy loosely is the idea of gradually exposing yourself to your fears in order to be able to overcome them and not fear them anymore. In a way, it's similar to when I was going through anorexia recovery and I kind of was facing my fear foods, because that was kind of exposure therapy in a way. You know, I was kind of building up towards the foods that I feared the most. Bit by bit, it was becoming easier, and the more I did it, the easier it became. And that was a similar experience with my exposure therapy journey. My biggest issues were around being alone, getting public transport, leaving the house by myself. I'd say those were like the three biggest things for me. And as you can imagine, as a girl in her 20s, that did put quite a lot of strain on my life and also on the people around me, because I couldn't do anything by myself. And so I was constantly relying on friends, my mum, you know, family members, my boyfriend to be there to do things with me. And I almost had no independence really. And it was quite an isolating and quite a horrible experience. And I know that there will be a lot of people who, although it's not really spoken about, will probably be experiencing a similar thing. I hope that maybe you can take something from this video that will help you become a little bit freer and move towards the life that you want to live. So first things first, when did my journey start? I kind of did my first exposure therapies around mid 2022, probably the summer of 2022. I remember getting on a bus with my boyfriend for about 2 stops. My therapist had challenged me to do it because I was aiming to get to London to go to a Phoebe Bridgers concert. But at this point in time, I literally could not get on a bus or any form of public transport. And obviously I would have needed to get the train and be okay with that. I'd like to also say my journey was a little bit all over the place, because even though I got on the bus with my boyfriend in 2022, I didn't start kind of stepping out of the house alone until about a year later. So it might seem a little bit jumbled, and that's because it was, and that's okay. Like, it just had to be at the time. So my therapist in 2022 kind of was challenging me to get on public transport. And so we started by me getting on the bus with my boyfriend. I don't think I'd got a bus in like a good few years, and I was absolutely terrified. I remember the thoughts that I had in my head, because this might seem weird to someone that doesn't have severe anxiety or PTSD or trauma or whatever. Like, it might seem weird, but I genuinely believed that every time I stepped on public transport, or anytime I was alone, anytime I was in a slightly what I perceived to be vulnerable situation, I was going to die, or something horrific was going to happen to me. I genuinely had totally convinced myself that I wouldn't make it out of that bus alive. And it might seem irrational, and it does seem irrational to me now, apart from the fact that I know that when I was living with that mindset, it felt so real and so scary. And so at the start of my journey, I got on the bus for like 2 stops, had to get off, was having a panic attack, was crying, literally just was freaking out, didn't know what to do with myself, and I never wanted to do it ever again. But one thing I learned from doing that horrific, terrifying first time on a bus was that I didn't die and nothing awful happened. Like, yes, I had a panic attack, but that was the worst of it. my therapist I remember her saying to me like, okay, it wasn't fun, but did what you were convinced was going to happen? And the answer was no. And so gradually I built that up. Me and my boyfriend would get on the bus for like 4 stops and then 5 stops and then 7 stops and then 10 stops, and gradually we built it up and it got easier each time. Sometimes I would repeat stages a couple times just so that it felt a little bit easier before I moved on to the next one. So maybe I'd sit on the bus for 5 stops twice, and then I'd be like, okay, I've been on there for that length of time and that kind of feels more okay. Now I'm going to move on to 7 stops. And then gradually I moved on to getting the train with my boyfriend, which was such a big deal. I think we got like a 20-minute train maybe to start with, and I remember just being so terrified but so proud of myself at the end when I managed to do it. And it allowed us to have like this really nice day out, and I knew that I was getting closer to going to that concert. I think that's another really big thing, having a goal to work towards, whether it's like a concert that, you know, won't be rearranged, or it's literally like, I want to go to London with my mum for a day. Whatever your goal is, have a goal that you're working towards, because it will keep you accountable. I was then able to get the train to London with my boyfriend, and then I started going to London with like my mum and my friends and stuff, but I literally could not be alone still in public anywhere. Like the second I thought I was alone, I just totally freaked out. So tackling public transport was one thing, and that was more kind of 2022. And then in 2023 I moved on to kind of trying to do things myself, all alone, which was absolutely petrifying to me. When I tell you like the world was scary to me, I would step out of my front door and I would immediately just feel like there had to be someone waiting for me. There had to be someone who was gonna do something bad to me, who'd been spying on my house, who like knew I was there and wanted to hurt me. Like I was just convinced that I was gonna step out of that house and something awful was gonna happen because I was alone. Trauma does funny things to the brain. At this point in time, I want to talk about the support I had. I was incredibly lucky because I was given a peer support worker by the NHS. Now, I'm not sure how common that really is, and I don't want to get anyone's hopes up because I know that waiting lists are insane and peer support workers are not used in like every NHS trust. If you even have access to NHS mental health services, because obviously that's a whole different ball game. A peer support worker is someone that basically has lived experience of mental health issues, be it anxiety or an eating disorder or whatever. And so they're not like a psychiatrist or a psychologist, you know, they haven't done, usually I don't think they've done a degree in anything medical. They are literally there to be a kind of professional friend and help you through things. My camera just died, but I'm back. So me and my peer support worker made a plan. It was a 10-step graded exposure plan, and it was basically a hierarchy of what scared me the most. So I think at the bottom I had literally standing in the porch at my parents' house with the door unlocked, alone. That used to scare me, and I know to some people that will sound crazy, but I was one step closer to being out in the big wide world by myself, and that freaked me out. It just scared me. I didn't like being home alone, so being home alone and being near the front door scared me. And I do remember, you know, I always had anxiety about being followed or whatever when I was younger. I remember coming home from school and like shutting the door really quickly behind me because I was just convinced that someone would be following me and would try and get in the house. Like these fears that I had been quite long lasting, even if they weren't as specific as the ones I'd developed from like the PTSD side of things. And so yeah, at the bottom was standing in the porch alone, at the top was going to London on a train alone. It felt impossible. It felt like I would never ever get to a place where I could go to London alone. I was honestly like, that's never gonna happen. I can't even step outside right now. And I felt pretty hopeless. But that changed very quickly as I started going up week by week and getting used to doing things by myself a little bit more. And if you don't have access to a peer support worker, which I know might be quite likely because as I said, I don't know how common they are, I also did these exercises with my boyfriend, sometimes with my mum in the week in between. And I actually had a couple questions about like, well, who do you do it with? Like, how do you do it by yourself? And I understand that it is a privilege to have people in my life who were willing to help me. Hopefully you will have a friend or a family member who, if you sit and explain to them why you need to do this, what your fear is, that you know it's irrational, but you can't stop feeling the fear. Hopefully they'll be willing to help you. If not, hopefully you'll be able to find a peer support worker or a charity or something that will help. So I obviously gradually started moving up the hierarchy, and it got to a point where I was walking halfway down the road and back by myself. And there is actually a part of me that like feels a bit embarrassed talking about it, because I do know that it sounds weird and it sounds just a bit bizarre, but at the time it was just so huge in my head and so scary. At that point in time, my peer support worker would always be waiting, you know, halfway down the road, and I always knew that they were going to be there at the end waiting for me. It got harder, I'd say, when I started having to do it by myself and going halfway down the road and back and knowing that no one was going to be outside with me. That really freaked me out. But the main thing I took from it was the longer I did it, the more and more I went through this journey, and the more I practiced the exercises that I was doing, the easier it got. I gradually learned that actually my brain was lying to me and that I didn't need to be fearing the things that I was fearing, because for a long time it was just terrifying. I had no evidence really to prove that my brain was wrong. So one of the really helpful things that my therapist taught me was the probability versus possibility mindset. I was living very much in a probability mindset, so I was like, it's really, really likely that I am going to step out of my house and be murdered. I was like, that is, you know, there's like a 100% chance of it happening. She wanted me to be more in a possibility mindset, where it's like, yeah, I can't tell you that there's absolutely 0% chance that you will step outside and be murdered, but it's actually quite unlikely, and you're going to live your life inside, in fear, scared, never having any life experiences because you're scared of this tiny chance of something awful happening. And I think that was something that really, really helped me, because a big thing that I held on to a lot was no one could tell me anything definite. And as a person with anxiety, I don't like the unknown. I like definites. I like to know yes or no. No one can tell me like there's absolutely no way that you're gonna get run over, because actually there could be a freak accident. Is it likely? No. There's the tiniest chance in the world that that's gonna happen, but no one can tell me that it absolutely categorically will not happen, and therefore my anxiety felt rational. When I started to put it in perspective of like, life is gonna come with risks, life is gonna come with a 1% chance that something bad is gonna happen. There's also a chance right now that the building I'm in could blow up. There's also a chance that this space that I consider safe could burn down or collapse, or a plane could crash and land on my house. Like, that is possible, but it's not probable. And I think when I learned that, I started to see my fear as something that was trying to keep me safe. Like, my anxiety was trying to keep me safe. It was trying to protect me, because that's what anxiety is, right? It's our threat drive trying to protect us from danger. My peer support worker kind of taught me to be like, thank you, anxiety, for trying to look out for me, but right now you've got a bit confused, and actually this is a risk that it's okay to take, because the chance of anything bad happening is so small. I don't want to go into like every detail of every little bit of my journey, because this will be a really long video, and also everyone's journey is going to be so different. But before I talk to you about kind of the little tips and tricks and tools that I found really helpful, I will kind of do a whistle stop tour through it. Obviously, I said about walking down the road. I remember posting a reel, and I had managed to go out of the house and walk the dog to the end of the road and back by myself, and that was huge for me. I was so emotional. I was like just in disbelief that I'd managed to do it. I was so chuffed with myself. I will link that reel in the description if you want to watch it. So I was kind of posting some of my exposure therapy journey, and so I kind of went walk to the end of the road and back, walk around the block alone. I think after that I got the bus 2 stops by myself, and I had to do that quite a lot, to be honest. The bus was something I got really stuck on. I found it really scary, especially because I was in an enclosed space with other people, so I had to keep going over that. But again, every time I did it, it got easier. It got like 10% less scary every time, to a point where I was like, oh, this really isn't as bad. Because to me, exposure therapy was just me giving myself that proof and that evidence that I needed, that actually these thoughts that I was 100% gonna die if I did X, Y, and Z were actually irrational, and I had evidence that that 100% convinced certainty I had was actually not true. So yeah, gradually I built it up, and I got longer and longer buses. I got to the point where I was getting the train for a couple stops by myself, and I didn't think I'd be able to do it, but actually I proved to myself time and time again that I could do it, and I was very lucky to have a very good support system around me as well. And I also knew that because of what I was doing for work, which is social media, by the way, but there's a lot of content creator opportunities in London. So when I've done podcasts with people, etc, it's almost always in London. I got to the point where I was managing to get trains by myself. It wasn't especially long distances, but I was just so happy that I was managing to do it. And that was kind of late last year, so late 2023. And then me and my boyfriend got this flat, which is a train or a bus ride away from my parents' house where they lived, and I knew that I had to work my arse off, and that I was gonna have to really push myself to prove that I would be fine moving out and would be able to get myself like to and from places, because it's not an easy place for my mum to just come pick me up and take me places, and I didn't want her to have to do that anymore. I needed a change, I needed independence, and so that was when things really picked up and I started to get trains for longer distances, and then eventually I got the train to London, but my friends got on it to meet me, and then I think maybe the next time I went to London I went all the way to Waterloo by myself, and then I'd done it and I was just like, whoa. And then after that I did also get like, I had to kind of challenge getting on the underground by myself and stuff. That's still a little bit like not nice, but I think a lot of people find it not nice when you're not from London. So that was kind of my journey loosely. I do realise I have like spoken a lot. The next thing I want to talk about is actual physical tools that I used to keep myself calm, or that I would recommend, starting with one that you will all have seen, Mr. Mole. He is the therapy mole. He's a jelly cat and you can tell that he is well loved. I kind of used him to fidget and just as a bit of comfort as well, because my boyfriend gave him to me, and I just, whenever I looked at him I was like, it's okay, it's fine. There was a little bit of me that's like, I'm 21 and I'm clutching to a cuddly toy in public, but I kind of just thought to myself like, yeah, Anne, it's fine. It's helping me and it's making me feel calm, and so he was always in my pocket. First physical tool is like, get either a fidget, I personally really like tangles, but maybe get a fidget or / get a soft toy that kind of makes you feel calm and safe when you look at it. Tip number 2, and I actually think that this would have really helped me, because I had a picture of my dog on my lock screen, because I obviously always have my phone at all times with me. She was on my lock screen constantly, but I actually recently got this Casetify case, and oh my gosh, I feel like it would have been absolutely perfect for me during that journey, because Casetify have an option to personalize your case. So I've literally put pictures of my dog and quotes that I find really helpful. This one says, what's the best that could happen? And this one says, get out of bed, do the things and own your life. And this one says, I love you, I'm glad I exist, which is from the poem The Orange, which is a poem that I really love. But they're just quotes that make me feel really comforted, and obviously, as I said, I had a picture of my dog as my lock screen because she makes me feel so safe and so calm. But actually I think having a case with like things that make you feel safe, reminders of why you're doing this, your favorite quotes, would be super helpful. And obviously, just because I've been through my exposure therapy journey doesn't mean I still don't get anxious. So I have actually been finding this really helpful, and I just love it because it's just adorable. So yeah, and I'd like to thank Casetify for sponsoring this video, because I have been using Casetify cases for years. They are the only brand I will trust on my phone. I literally have thrown my phone at the floor so many times and look, no cracks. I'll put the link in the description for you to customize your own case if that's something you want to do. As I said, it has been something that's really been helpful for me. Even now I'm looking in my viewfinder and just staring at all the cute little pictures. But yeah, obviously if you don't want to get it on a phone case, you could literally just take a little picture with you of your pet or something that makes you feel safe and calm, or a quote, like just have them in your pocket, maybe some little flashcards or something, just those actual physical reminders so that you can get out of your head. The last thing that I'd say was really like a staple for me to always have in my bag was an essential oil. This isn't the one I had. I usually had like a peppermint or I was not saying clean bed sheets, clean cotton one, because those are like my favorite scents, my most calming scents. Essential oils literally come in really small bottles like this, and so you can take them wherever with you, take the lid off, just smell it. And then I kind of felt like when I was feeling a bit dissociative or a bit spaced out, that would really snap me back in. So fidgets, reminders of things that make you feel safe, and essential oils. Saying essential oils feels really weird in my mouth right now. Essential oils, because I keep saying essential oils. There you go. Okay, so now I just want to answer some of the questions that I got asked on my Instagram. The first one, which I've kind of gone into a little bit, how do you deal with the things that are making you anxious not being a completely irrational fear? This is something that I, as I said, definitely struggled with, because I was very much like, well, you can't tell me that it won't happen, so there's my proof that it will happen. Just because something isn't impossible doesn't mean that it is probable, as I've said. The other thing is, something terrible could happen at any minute. And I don't like saying that, because when other people say that, it makes me feel anxious. But that is the truth. Bad things could happen. I do not want to waste my life. And this is something you need to ask yourself, like, do you want to waste your life stuck inside, terrified of doing things because of the tiny chance that something bad might happen when you are out and about? Because at the end of the day, as I said, something bad could happen while you're inside. Like, you are potentially missing out on so much life, so much happiness, because of a tiny weeny probability. And also, the other thing I'd like to say, if you are like me and you read the news, and then when there's bad things happening like there are right now, you get obsessed with reading the news, don't. Delete the news app, don't read the news. Like, maybe ask people around you, is there anything going on that you need to know about? But do not read the news, because the amount of horrific stories in the news, it's just going to fill your brain with so much anxiety, and you are literally going to a place that is telling you every negative thing that you should be terrified of at once, because news companies don't make money from sharing positive news. Like, there are good things that happen in the world every day. There are good people, there are good things that happen in the world, but you're not going to hear about it because these news websites will not get clicks and money and advertisers, because it's just not interesting enough to the general population. So stop reading the news, because it kind of makes it seem like disproportionately terrible things are happening in the world. Sometimes these things are possible, and no one can tell you that they'll never happen, and that is difficult, but possible does not mean probable. The next question is how to find a balance between pushing yourself and not pushing too far and overwhelming yourself. I think this is a good one, because there definitely were times where I was like, I can't do it, and it was like, no, you can, you're just scared. And there was times where I was like, I can't do it, and it was like, no, okay, that's going to be too much today and I will have a meltdown. I think sometimes you won't know that line because you have to push yourself. I think you have to always try, and if you know, you get 2 steps down the road and you're like, I really cannot do this today, know that it's okay, and that if you have to turn back, it is okay, as long as you try again. But if you're having a really hard day and you can't do it, like, give yourself a bit of grace, that is okay. It's so much better not to be completely burnt out and overwhelmed. But at the same time, when you do it, it is going to feel overwhelming, and you have to take care of yourself afterwards, and know that the overwhelm and the panic that you're feeling right now is to get you to a happier and better life. I think it is just a case of knowing that you are allowed to have a day where you don't feel able to do it, and that doesn't mean you failed. It just means that you have to rest today and try again tomorrow. Obviously, I've kind of covered this as well, but how did you get started? Is there a planning system, or did you just jump in? I didn't really just jump in. I definitely had a deadline for things because of that concert, but I did have a plan. The first plan obviously was a plan that I made with my therapist, and we'd kind of check in on it when I had a session. And the other plan I just made with my peer support worker. And then I also made a plan for myself once I don't know what the word is, been discharged from a peer support worker, but you don't really get discharged for them. You kind of like graduate from it. Like, once I'd stopped having sessions with the peer support worker and I still had a little bit of a way to go by myself, then I made a kind of timeline plan on Notion. But I don't know if you are someone that gets quite rigid about things and you're like, oh my god, I haven't got the bus for 5 stops by August the 17th, so now my whole plan is rubbish and I shouldn't bother, then I wouldn't recommend putting any timings on it. Maybe just make like a hierarchy in your notes app and tick them off as you go. Maybe put how many times you're going to do it. But yeah, maybe don't put timings on it, because if you're quite rigid, it will probably freak you out. Okay, the next question is, does it have to be official? No, I only called it exposure therapy because I kept saying, I'm kind of doing like an exposure therapy kind of thing, and then it was my peer support workers that called it graded exposure. But that doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I am a medical professional who's telling you to do exposure therapy. Exposure therapy is just the act of exposing yourself to things. So say you had a fear of water, maybe it would be like you just decide one day that you're gonna challenge that by running your hand under a tap. And then once you've got comfortable with that, you're like, okay, because I really want to work through this fear of water, I'm gonna put my feet in the bath. This is so random, obviously, but you can do it yourself. You don't have to have someone there being like, this is what you do. Just set a graded plan to challenge your fears and know that it's going to be okay. And then you can work up to the bigger things, like say you did have a fear of water, maybe eventually your aim is to go swimming in the sea. Just have a goal, have a starting point, and then gradually work towards it. The next question is how to help your friend with exposure therapy. So I actually had some really lovely friends that did help me, and the biggest things that I found helpful from my friends, or that I think I would do if I was a friend that would be helpful. First of all, reassurance, but not reassurance in like, nothing's gonna happen, because as I said, we will always convince ourselves that something probably will happen, even though it's unlikely to. Reassure them that you don't think they are stupid or weird or strange, or you're not embarrassed of them for having these fears. Like, just don't make them feel weird and strange. Don't make them seem crazy, because it's a very isolating thing, and the fact that someone's opened up to you and might need help with exposure therapy is a really big thing. Be a safe space for them, make them aware that you don't think it's weird. The other thing is, I'd say, like, take it at their pace, but also don't let them not push themselves, which is a really like difficult line to tread, I think. I'd say the right level of pushing someone is like, I know that you don't want to do this, but I believe that you can do it. Not being like, you have no choice, I've booked a surprise trip and we have to go do this and you're gonna do it, otherwise I'm gonna be upset with you. Like, no guilt, no pressure, just like kind of, I know your anxiety is making you feel like you can't do this, but you can do it and I'm going to be there with you. Just gentle support and encouragement to push them in that way. No sort of like taking the reins, taking charge, because also for a lot of people there's a huge fear of being out of control and you don't want someone else to just stop deciding things for you. But at the same time, there will be a lot of times where you will want to avoid things and just not do it, but that is your anxiety, and so it's helpful to be aware of that, if you know what I mean. The last thing, dealing with afterwards and the exhaustion from pushing yourself. It is tiring. It is really, really, really tiring to do scary things and to go against your brain. Like, it honestly knocked me out when I did it. Like, emotionally, I was knackered. A whole load of self-care. Like, for me, I didn't really have many plans anyway because I couldn't really go out that much. So I would have a lot of free time afterwards to kind of chill, spend time with my family, or actually a lot of the time I would just nap. I would just sleep, have a little nap, play my Switch, cuddle up under a blanket, like just give myself activities that did not take any brain power because I would have used so much brain power. So yeah, basically just knowing that the exhaustion is natural and that it's okay and that it won't be so tiring soon. And just knowing that like it's all worth it and you need to take this time now to put the work in and then to rest and to let yourself heal so that you can have a brighter, happier life. And I know sometimes that it can feel like, yeah, well, that's never going to happen for me, but I also felt like that. And that's the thing, like I was never convinced in my head, I can do this, I'm going to be fine. I was like, oh, that would be amazing, but I'll never get there. And now I'm here and I can go to London on the train and come home at night and then go again the next day and not be like absolutely winded. Like, yeah, I'm tired because I have a low social battery generally, but my life is just so much better now, so much better. And I do still have days where I struggle. I'm an anxious person. I do have PTSD. I am going to have days where I find it a bit more difficult, but it's just about reminding myself that actually that doesn't mean I failed or gone backwards. It just means that today's a harder day and that's okay. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really hope that this was a helpful video, and thank you to Casetify for sponsoring. I will obviously leave the link in the description. If you have any more questions, please comment them down below and I would do my best to reply. Thank you for watching. I love you all lots, and if you embark on an exposure therapy journey because of this, I would love to hear about it. And if you're already on it, then keep going because you can definitely do this and I believe in you. See you soon!